Tonight, for the third week of this class, we're going to finish up with the laws of cooking on Shabbos. And depending on time, we'll see if we can move into other things. So last week, the last 2 weeks, we defined the categories of cooking on Shabbos, what's considered cooking, what is considered the different situations of a kli rishon, a first vessel, a kli sheni, a second vessel, and all that related to that. We discussed it at great length last week. Tonight we're going to go on to the other topic, which is known as the blech. The blech comes... The blech is the Mishnah says, and I'm going to read to you the Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in the Tractate Shabbos, the first Mishnah of the third chapter. It says like this: a double stove that was heated with straw or with stubble, because in those days they had what's called a kira, which you heated it up with either coals or whatever, and straw or stubble they would throw in there, whatever, either wood. And on top they would put there was a hole on the top, and that's where they would put the pots. And it would, the fire would cook everything. So the law is that if a double stove that was heated with straw or with stubble, we may place a cooked food upon it, you're allowed to put a cooked food upon it on Shabbos, before Shabbos in other words. If it was heated with mark or with wood, or may not place cooked food upon it until he has swept away the coals, or until he has put ashes over them. That means that if it's cooked with regular wood, if it was cooked with things like straw, stubble, it's a very small fire, there's nothing really there. So there's nothing, we're not worried that anyone is going to be involved with raking it and stoking it and so on. But if it's real coals from real wood, so you're not allowed to put on there, you're not allowed to put on there a pot, because we're worried that you're going to stoke the flames to heat up, to make the cooking even faster. And you may do it on Shabbos. And it continues and goes on. The premise of this idea of the blech is this Mishnah. That, in other words, let's take, for example, let's start off with putting food onto a fire before Shabbos that is not cooked. That means you came home late. Your wife came home late, and she has no time to cook before Shabbos. There's no time to cook before Shabbos. So what does she do? She throws together a cholent, or throws together a chicken soup, or throws together whatever, rice or beans or whatever it is, and 2 minutes before she lights candles, she puts it on the flame. Right? So from the perspective of cooking, she's done nothing wrong, because the fact that it's going to cook by itself on Shabbos, because it's raw, 2 minutes before Shabbos is all raw. What she's relying on is that she'll leave it on the stove before Shabbos, and garnished it'll cook itself. While on Shabbos by itself, she's not doing anymore. She turned everything on before Shabbos, and is cooking by itself. The law is, from the perspective of cooking, there's no problem, because the fact that it's cooking by itself is not the Jew's problem. So technically speaking, from the Isur Bishul, from the prohibition against cooking, if a woman did that, she came home an hour before Shabbos and she got herself together and put everything in the oven or on the stove, mamish right before she lit the candle, and it's cooking for the next 2 hours, by the time the husband comes back from shul, she's got a whole meal ready, cooked, the machai is hot, now fresh, great. Right? From the there's no cooking. She has not done anything wrong yet. But the rabbi said, no good. We're not letting you do that. Why are we not letting you do that? Because as long as it's not cooked, if she'll realize, if the woman will realize 15 minutes into Shabbos, I turned it on to 150 instead of 250. I turned it on to 150 instead of 250. Now she looks at the clock. By 7 o'clock, the husband's coming home. She needs the food. She's bringing guests also. It's going to be embarrassing. The food's not going to be cooked. We'll have to wait till 9 o'clock for the food to be cooked. What is she going to do? Go over and turn it to 250? That now is a serious problem. Now she's not only turning on a fire on Shabbos, she's doing all kinds of problems. So the rabbis were afraid that they will stoke the coals. Those days it was coals. Today it's a knob. But it's the same idea. The rabbis were afraid against stoking the coals or turning on the knob higher. They said it all has to be covered. No. It has to be covered. The stove, the fire must be covered. What was the language of the rabbis? Here it is again. Until, put ashes over the coals so that it's covered. So there's no more. Once you have ashes, you cover the fire, you cover the coals. You're not going to go stoke the coals then, because you see clearly it's covered. So that's a good reminder that you're not allowed to do it. In our day and age where we don't have coals and we don't have ashes and we don't have any of those, we have stovetops, but we have knobs. So the rabbi said, how do you cover it with ashes? You don't cover. We can't cover. We're not going to cover our stovetop with whatever. We cover it with a blech, with a piece of sheet metal, and the whole fire is covered, plus the knobs. You should cover the knobs as well. Now, if you can't cover the knobs because they're on the side, so some say that covering the fire alone is a good reminder that you shouldn't touch the knobs. But the truth is, it's probably a good idea to cover it with some kind of silver foil as well. That means that technically speaking, if you came home late, you can do this. You can put the pot on the stove right before Shabbos, raw, and cover as long as it's covered. As long as it's covered, we're not worried. What are we worried about? Just let it cook by itself on Shabbos. Now, that's number one. So that's talking about a blech, you put it on the stovetop. What about a hot plate, for example? It's a hot plate that has knobs, controls that you can play around with the temperature. So it has the same thing. You have to cover it. You must cover the hot plate with the knobs if possible. Just like a stove. It has the same law as a stovetop. Right? How about if it doesn't have any knobs? You just, once you plug it in, it goes up to a certain temperature, and that's it. There's nothing to play around with. So that itself is not a problem anymore, because why would you not be allowed to put on there? So you're allowed to leave stuff on there but you have to cover it. This is all logical, right? You're looking at me.
Because I missed the beginning. I didn't know you were allowed to cook food on Shabbos.
You're not allowed to cook food on Shabbos. If it's allowed to cook itself on Shabbos. The food's allowed to cook itself on Shabbos. However, there are lots of problems that can come about by not cooking your food. I'm going in order. So let's not come to any conclusions yet. By the end of tonight, you'll find out that it's absolutely not good to leave your cooking for the last minute. Have everything cooked before Shabbos for other reasons. Not because we're worried. The cooking is not the issue here. It's allowed to cook before. It's allowed to cook on Shabbos by itself. It's absolutely allowed. As long as the fire is covered, it's allowed to be cooked. It's best that the cholent should also be fully cooked before Shabbos. It's best that the cholent should be cooked before Shabbos. I'll give you a simple reason why. You go over the cholent, you want to look at the cholent, see how it's doing. You take off the lid. And it's not fully cooked, you're not allowed to put the lid back on.
Right.
Because with putting the lid back on, you are now hasting the cooking, no question about it. Without the lid, it would take longer. With the lid, it takes faster. So if it's not cooked before Shabbos, technically, if you don't touch the cholent and everything is right, but there's so many different things that can go wrong that the rabbis have said to us, just get everything cooked before Shabbos. But if not, there's ways, it's not like you don't have food for Shabbos. You can,
Come to the Kiddush.
Come to Kiddush.
No. Not with regard to a crock pot. Very practical. A crock pot. Most houses use crock pots today for cholent. So the truth of the matter is so what's a crock pot? So the heating element is the stovetop. You can consider that the stovetop. And the pot that you put in is the pot. So the truth is you should have something covering in between, just like a stovetop. You have a blech. So here you should cover the whole thing with a surface of silver foil, thick silver foil if possible. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how about leaving on the fire? In other words, let's say you got home on time, you cooked your whole Shabbos before Shabbos. You cooked, it's all fully cooked before Shabbos. Nothing is left for the... Do you need a blech at that? Do you still need a blech? If it's fully cooked, the rabbis are not worried with fully cooked food that you're going to stoke the coals. What are you worried about? It's fully cooked. Why should you stoke it?
You leave it on the heater.
You what?
You can put it on the blech if it's fully.
Why do we need a blech? You can leave it on the fires themselves. What are you worried? You're going to go turn on the fire. You're going to burn the food.
Right.
So why are we worried? Nevertheless, we still need... So first of all, when we talk about cooked food, what's considered cooked? How much of it does it have to be fully cooked to be considered cooked? So there's a machlokes. What's considered cooked food? So let me go like this. First of all, like this. Fully cooked food, technically you don't need a blech. You don't need a blech for fully cooked food because we're not worried about stoking the coals, right? But now, what is considered fully cooked food? So there's a machlokes in the Gemara, in the Talmud there's a machlokes, an argument between the rabbis, what is considered fully cooked. We talked about it the first week about this already. There are three opinions. One opinion says a third cooked, K'maichel ben Drusoi, which means that there was a group of bandits in the ancient times of the Talmud. It was known that there was a guy named Ben Drusoi, the son of Drusoi. What his first name was, I don't know. But that's what they called him. And he was a known bandit, a thief. And he would steal from people, but because he was always looking for the next person to steal from, so he didn't really take long breaks. For lunch and for dinner, he didn't take lunch breaks. So what he had to eat. So he would cook up his lunch quick, and it would be a third cooked he would eat already. That's it. I got to get my next customer, right? You never know who's the next guy driving by. It could be a limousine. A guy with a millionaire go by, and they eat my cup, and wait for my food to be fully cooked, and I lose a good customer like that. So he was known to eat his food. I'm not joking. This is in the Talmud. This is a true story. So they took that person as a sign. If he can eat it, it's edible. That's cooked. That's considered cooked according to one opinion. As long as it's a third cooked, you can leave it on the pot without a blech, on the stove without a blech, when the fire is on, because it's already cooked. You're not going to stoke it. There's no reason to stoke it anymore. Another opinion says no. It's got to be at least half cooked. In other words, they're arguing how Ben Drusoi, this guy, would eat. Would he eat it? Would he cook it a third or a half? That was the machlokes. How did he eat his food? The other opinion says no, it's got to be fully cooked. If it's not fully cooked, we're afraid still you're going to stoke the coals, and therefore you need a blech till it's fully cooked. Okay, so that we got that down right? Now, our custom is, in actuality, as I said before, it's highly advisable to cover the blech, and even then have the cooked food fully cooked. The food fully cooked. That means even if the food is fully cooked, you can't put your food on the stove without a blech. And even if you're going to use a blech, you have to make sure that it's fully cooked. Why? It's better. It's not an absolute necessity, but it's very much advisable. And we'll discuss why. Because if it's not fully cooked, and you take off the lid, you can't put it back on. You're prone to making mistakes if it's not fully cooked. You're prone to make mistakes. If it's not fully cooked, you'll go over to check out, right, to see how it's cooking, to see what's going on. If you're ready, you'll take it off, you can't put it back on. So from that perspective alone, it's better to not have food that's not fully cooked on the blech on Shabbos. You should have everything fully cooked before Shabbos. That's one problem that you will stay away from if the food is fully cooked. Because if it's fully cooked and you take off the lid, you can put it back on. There's no reason why not. There's other issues if it's not fully cooked. We'll talk about it later. Are you allowed to move on the blech itself? Yeah, the blech covers the whole stove. Your blech covers the whole stove, or only half of it.
I have a separate blech.
I'm talking about your blech covers. How big is it? It covers the whole four burners.
Yeah, it's not no,
Like a warming. He has like a warming.
I have like a.
Oh, that's something. But who uses a blech over here? No one uses a blech.
No.
What do you guys use? Warming plates. Don't tell me you're eating cold food.
No.
You're only eating cold food.
No?
You're not allowed to do that.
A warming.
You know that, huh?
Lukewarm. A warming.
Not allowed to do it.
Really?
Yeah, you have to eat hot food on Shabbos.
Kenny, is ours a blech?
There's nothing
No,
wrong with
we do
using
it
a hot
still.
plate.
No.
What?
Still, highest level, like 300. And before I light the candles, I take them out, I cover it up.
Which mat?
You take it
No.
out.
I take it out,
Take it out of the
The
oven.
food. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then cover it up nicely.
Oh, at matmina.
Yeah.
So you insulate it. That's something else.
Yeah.
That's
And then
fine.
when
That's
we
what you do.
Yeah, I mean,
So insulation. So you have the way you do it. By the way, that's a whole other thing with insulation. I'm going to talk about that. Insulation you can only do. You should have it boil before you insulate it. Because if you don't have it boiled, if it's not hot enough, the insulation is not going to do anything for you.
It's super hot.
If it's boiling hot, then the insulation keeps it hot. And when you come home and you eat your meal, you have a real hot soup. My wife does that sometimes too. But it's very important that you eat hot food on Shabbos. And not only that, it's very important you eat hot food by day. That's really the Chacham were metakin, made a takona, instituted that you should eat hot food. By night it's easy, like you're saying. You take it out a minute before Shabbos starts, and then you eat it a half hour later. It's still boiling hot, no problem. But by day it's going to be colder. No, it's not going to stay there. So they said, no, you have to make sure. You know why they said that? You know why we eat cholent on Shabbos? Because of the tzedukim. You don't know this? Why do we eat cholent on Shabbos? Why do we have hot food on Shabbos by day? Well, it's a whole thing of Jewish custom to eat cholent. The reason is because the Sadducees, I'm digressing here, but you talked about it, so I'll mention. You know what the Sadducees were? The group of Jews in the time of the Second Temple. They were heretics, really. They denied the veracity or the authenticity of the oral tradition, the oral law. They said there is no oral law. It's only the written law. And since in the Torah it says you're not allowed to burn fire on Shabbos, so they interpret it to mean not only are you not allowed to light it on Shabbos, it's not allowed to be on Shabbos, period. So perforce they ate cold food. There was no way they can have hot food on Shabbos. Because they would have hot food Friday night, because they would turn it off before Shabbos, but it was so hot that half hour into Shabbos, and they sit down to eat, you can eat, it's still hot. But the next morning already they had no hot food. So the rabbis instituted, in order to show that we're not Siddukim, that we do believe in the oral tradition, which teaches us that you're allowed to have fire on Shabbos if you didn't light it. So for that reason, we intentionally have fire on Shabbos, and we have our food on the fire to show that we're not Siddukim, so that we have food all the way till the next day, and we have hot food on Shabbos day. So this is a serious thing. So, welcome to the world of Cholent.
Can I ask a quick question? Could you, if you cook all your food and you turn the oven off right before it's Shabbos?
Why is it so hard to, before your question, what's the reason you don't go and buy a piece of sheet metal and have a blech like every Jewish home? Is there a reason you don't want that? or just you never got the blech and you just.
Never got the black.
We have a blessing.
I'm gonna have my next Friday night, next Tuesday night. I'll have 10 blechs, and we'll give everyone a blech.
They work for glass. What is it for glass top?
They work for glass tops. Why not?
Oh, okay.
You could.
No.
They don't crack the
You know,
glass?
scratch,
No.
flat.
I mean, so buy a
Doesn't
burner.
get that
My
hot.
wife, the truth is, we have a separate burner. We have a blech on that burner. Shabbos thing. One coil or 2 coils, and the blech is there. That's it.
Oh.
Well, I have a big,
Covers
But who says that it'll crack if you have a half a blech on there?
I don't know.
You put it on a little fire, it's not going to crack. I don't know.
Oh,
Anyway,
yes.
what was your question?
But could you then take it out of the oven, if you turn the oven off, if you light the candle, I mean, once Shabbos starts, can you open up the oven and take the stuff out?
If it's off, the oven
Yeah.
is off. Why not?
And the
Sure.
light doesn't
Yeah.
go
Because it's still warm.
No, if the light goes off, then
No, the light's off.
no, then it's no problem.
No,
So,
we should
because
just,
it does stay warm in there,
So what? Think this through. What could be the problem?
right? I
You're
mean,
opening up a closed oven. What's the issue?
no, we should use our,
Well,
we have a
lunch is a
Shabbat mode
good
oven,
thing.
we don't even use that. Should use that.
What's a Shabbat mode oven? We also, I think, have.
Shabbat
We
mode
don't use
stays
it.
on a certain temperature.
It doesn't change
It
temperature.
doesn't change, the light doesn't go on.
So
what's the
When you
problem
take everything
with
out,
it?
you don't have to take everything out all at once.
So what's the
apparently.
problem with it?
Just don't use it.
I
It's a
don't
problem?
use the Shabbos
It just
No.
turns off the safety feature because normal ovens will turn off.
Let's move on. The reason you need a blech, even if the food is altogether covered, and we'll get to this a little later, is what we call chazorah. Chazorah means to return the pot onto the blech. If you don't have a blech, you can never put it back. For example, you're serving soup, and you don't want to finish serving. You want to serve some, so you have a guest that's going to come a half hour later,
Right.
and you want him to have hot soup. So you have to take the pot off the blech to serve. You can't serve from on the blech. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. It has to be off the fire. But you want to put the soup back on the fire in order to keep it warm for the guest that's coming in an hour. So, how do you put it back? If you don't have a blech, there's no way you're allowed to put it back on the fire. If you have a blech, you can put it back with certain conditions, which we will discuss soon. So that's another reason, even if it's fully cooked, you have to have a blech in order to put it back on the fire, if you want to do that.
The hot plate's not good? You put it back on the hot plate?
Not if it has a temperature.
Even if you covered the temperature?
Then yeah, if you cover the whole
The
hot
whole
plate,
yes.
then it's like a stove. If you have a blech, you can put it back.
Okay.
If you meet the conditions, which we'll get to soon. So I'm just giving you reasons why it's better to have all the food cooked before Shabbos. But if it's not cooked before Shabbos, that happened that you came late and you threw all the fire onto the blech, onto the fire before Shabbos, onto the blech, before Shabbos. It's not cooked. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. If it's covered, we're not worried you're stoking there's flames. You can, if it's cooking itself on Shabbos, you've done nothing wrong. But it's, like I said, it's much better to have it all cooked for the reasons I mentioned. Clear? We can move on? Next. What happens if you have a situation like I said, where you don't have the time to cook before Shabbos? For winter Fridays, I could see that happening. When people come late, and so it's always good to cook Friday, Thursday night, whatever. But if it happens, so as long as it's fine, if as long as it is this in an extreme situation, as long as it's cooked a third, at least a third cooked. It's hard to measure that exactly, so wait a little longer. Let's say a half. You can even leave it on the fire without a blech, but obviously then you're not allowed to put it back, and you're not allowed to move it. It's a lot of limitations. But in a extreme situation, that can also happen. You can rely on that. What happens if someone left uncooked food on a fire without a blech? She made a mistake. She went to home and she came late and she didn't put a blech and cooked the fire. Not as long as it's on before Shabbos. She thought it's okay. So you're not allowed to eat that food till Motzei Shabbos. And Matzah Shabbos, you also have to wait till it takes the time to cook that food. It's like an hour after Shabbos. Clear? It doesn't usually happen. We're more disciplined than that. We know that we have to have a blech, so we're used to that already. But I'm just giving you the laws as they are recorded. Next. Now let's talk about returning food onto a fire. Like I described before. You came home, and I'll tell you this is very common in my house, especially when you have bochum, when we lived in Crown Heights, we learned in the yeshiva. And we had yeshiva Friday night till 7. In the winter, the winter comes in there 4:30, 4:20. So we had yeshiva till 7:30. We learned Chassidus and so on. 7:30 we died. And we came home at 8 o'clock, 8:15. My father wasn't going to wait for us till 8:15 to eat when Shabbos starts at 4 o'clock.
Right.
So he started already at 6, 7, whenever it was. He started when he was ready. And then we came in the middle. We came in very late. That's how it was. That's how it was. Every yeshiva student came into his family Shabbos meal at least an hour and a half late. There was no other way. I mean, you couldn't expect your parents and the whole family, little kids, to wait till yeshiva, till your time when you came home at 8:30. Ridiculous. There were times that I came home at 9:30 in the winter. Because we used to, when I was older, and they learned in 770 already, I would wait for the Rabbi to go home. And then I went home. So that was late. So my mother, what did she do? She didn't want us to have we shouldn't have soup. She wanted us to have hot soup. So what did she do? So she made sure that the soup would end up back on the blech. So that when we come home, the soup is boiling hot. But what do you do? How do you do this? Well, you take it off. You serve everyone, then you put it back. The problem is, the rabbi said you cannot put back the pot on the blech once you took it off. Why?
Because it's cooking it?
No, it's not cooking it again. It's hot. It's
Warming?
boiling it. No. It looks like you're cooking.
It looks
When you go and you take a pot from off the fire and you put it on a fire, it looks like you're cooking. No, the onlookers say, "Hey, the guy's cooking." That looks like you're cooking. So they said, if you can find a way where it doesn't look like you're cooking, we'll let you put it back. And they came up with 3 ways. Huh? What's this?
Yeah.
If you can find a way where we can avoid that view, that the onlooker would say, well, he's not really cooking. This is different. Then you can put it back. And they came up with 3 things. What were the 3 things? Number 1, that when my mother takes off when you take off the pot of soup from the blech, you have in mind to put it back. What that means is that when you put it back, it's not a new thing. It's just a continuation of what was cooked already before. So it's not you look like you're now cooking. It's already, once you had in mind that you're going to put it back, so it's just a continuation of the prior cooking, which is already cooked anyway. But not enough. Then you need something else. Even once you took it off and you had in mind to put it back, if you took it off and put it down on the table, now you're going to start picking it off the table and putting it back. That's ridiculous. No one knows what you had in mind. They're just seeing you took a pot from the table and you put it on the oven. My goodness, you're cooking. So they said you can't put it down. You have to hold it in your hand, so 2 people have to do this. Right. One person holds it, and the other person ladles it out onto this plate, and then he goes and puts it back. So that's how it was done. My father would go in there, pick it off the thing. It was a big pot, right? So it was heavy. He would hold it. My mother would ladle the soup out of the thing into the bowl, and then he would put it back. That doesn't look like you're cooking, because you see clear what happened over here.
Heavy.
What?
It looks like just the pot is heavy. Somebody's helping you.
No, that doesn't look like the pot is heavy. The pot is heavy, you should put it down on the table. That's a smart thing to do. But we don't do that, so it doesn't look like you cook. But then there's a 3rd thing. Obviously,
Make two small pots of soup.
put it back on the fire, obviously it has to be covered with a blech. So we're talking about if there's a blech, there's only 2 things you have to make sure. And when you took it off, you had in mind to put it back on, and you didn't put it down. Now, with regard to putting down, there is a whole machlokes, a whole dispute among the argument among the rabbis. What's called putting down? What's called putting down?
Does it touch the table?
Yeah, that's the question. Do you have to actually hold it in your hand? How about leaning it on the table? Not leaving it go, but you're leaning it on the table. Or putting it on the table completely, but you're still holding it. What? So there's three opinions. I'm not joking. One opinion is that you have to actually hold it in your hand. You can't put it down at all. You can't even lean it on the surface of the countertop or whatever. Another opinion says, yes, you could lean it, but you can't lean it completely. You can't lean it completely. That means you can lean it, let's say this is the pot, you can lean it like this, so that if your hand leaves it go, it'll fall. And it'll splat, it'll fall down. So if you're just holding it, you're putting it down on the table, just holding it, that if you leave it go, nothing will happen to it, that's considered having put it down already. The fact that you're holding it on is not considered holding on, because it doesn't need you anymore. But as long as it still needs you, you're holding it like this, just to have it easier on your hand. It shouldn't be too heavy, but if you leave it go, it'll fall down. That's not called putting it down yet. So that's the second opinion. The third opinion says no, you can put it on the table, as long as your hands are touching it, it's still a continuation of prior cooking. That's a good enough. Anyone looking sees what's going on, and it's not a problem. So those are the three opinions. What should we do in actuality?
Take two pots.
That's what I was going to say.
It's best to be stringent and follow the first opinion that says you have to actually hold it. But if the pot is very, very heavy, it's a large pot, like a commercial pot, well, it's just, so then you can be lenient according to the second opinion, lean it. Okay? Now, what happens if you didn't have in mind to put it back? For example, you weren't thinking of putting back the soup. Can't put it back. But what happens if in the case you bought a set of pots and they all look the same, and by mistake you took off the cholent instead of the soup? You took off the cholent, you didn't have in mind to put it back because you thought it was soup. Oh my goodness, you open it up as the cholent. What do you got to do now? You don't have cholent for tomorrow. So that's already a different kind of mistake. Then you're allowed to put it back, even if you didn't have in mind, as long as you're still holding it. The premise is, without confusing everyone, when you take it off and you want to put it back, which the truth is, in our circumstances, that hardly happens, because we're all coming home at the same time, we're all sitting down at the meal at the same time, no one's coming an hour late. It's different situations in our life, in your practical life, so that you're not even really going to be putting back stuff on the stove that often, right? I don't think you have such a thing where you take it off, you have to put it back to keep it warm for someone else. Does that happen in your life, in your experience? So it doesn't really happen. I'm just giving you the laws so that you know that there's such a thing. Next. What happens if your food was on the blech and at 15 minutes into Shabbos you realize something wrong with this oven? Something wrong with the oven, something wrong with the fires. It's on, it's off, it's not, you have a feeling it's not going to be good. But you have another blech, with another good oven. Are you allowed to take it from one blech and put it on another blech? The answer is you are. Straight from one blech to the other, as long as it's boiling hot, no problem. As long as it's hot.
It's cooked.
As long as it's cooked, of course it has to be cooked. If it's not cooked, you're not allowed to put it on the same blech either.
Has to be hot.
Both blechs the fires have to be on, of course. Okay. Well, if it's not on, what are you putting it there for?
So you just
It's
have
cold.
to have another block.
If you have.
That's on.
That's on, yeah. Well, if it's not on, you're not looking to put it there.
Right.
We're talking about if it's on, you're allowed to put it from one blech to the other as long as it's hot and it's fully cooked. Because if it's not fully cooked, you're certainly not allowed to put it on the blech at all because you're cooking. That's called cooking. You are actually cooking. If you put a non-cooked food onto a blech, you're cooking.
No, if you had put it on before Shabbat.
No, we're talking about if you took it off.
Right, but if
You
you put it
took
on
it off.
before Shabbat, it hasn't cooked fully,
Yeah.
and then you took it off.
Can't put it back. Cannot put it back.
That's why you have to wait. But when
That's why.
that's
That's
the
why you
requirement.
have. That's why the rabbis. That's what I was saying before. Even though technically you can leave non-cooked food on a blech,
Just in
you're
case.
running into problems of putting it back, and therefore they said have all your food cooked before Shabbos, so that you can put it back and you're not going to make no mistakes and so on. You follow? Are you with us?
Yeah.
Good. Now, what happens if you took from the blech, you took it off the blech, and then you realize there's a leak in the pot? You realize it's leaking. Or it's on the pot, and drip, drip, drip. You realize it's dripping all over the place. So you say, wait a minute, take it off the blech, put it into another pot, and put that pot back on the blech. Absolutely not. That you're not allowed to do. When are you allowed to put back on the blech, the klirishin, that same pot in which it was cooked? But to move it into another pot and that second pot put black, even though it's all in your hands. You didn't do anything yet, you didn't put it down, you didn't do anything wrong. But to move it from one pot to the next, you're not allowed to do that. And I'll tell you where this is very practical. For example, you come home on Friday night, you finish your meal, and you want to sniff around in the cholent. How's the cholent doing?
Yeah.
And you realize the cholent is drying up very quickly. You have a problem. By the next morning, it's going to be like, it's going to be a disaster. So you have to put water into that cholent. You got to get some water in there in order for you to have cholent the next morning. It happens all the time. So what do? You run over to your chaynik, to your hot water kettle where you're going to drink coffee, and you fill up a cup, and you go run and put it into the pot. It's all cooked water, right? You violated a law. Because you put it into a klisheni. The fire now went into a klisheni, and now you're putting that back into the klirishin. You got a real problem over here. It's just like you're not allowed to move the content from one vessel to the next if you're planning to put it back on the fire. So how do you deal with the cholent problem if it's drying up? You have to go take the cholent pot, literally, and put it under the spigot of your chaynik, of your samovar, whatever you have there for your coffee, and it should go straight into the pot.
Because it's klirishin.
But they're both are klirishins, no problem.
They're both?
Yeah, the water is a klirishin, and the cholent is a klirishin. Now the water is going into the cholent, but it's both klirishin. They're both. It's not a problem because it's cooked water going from one klirishin to another klirishin. It's not a problem. You follow or not?
Yeah.
But this is you have to be very careful with this because people make a mistake. Oh, I'll take innocently hot water and I'll put it in. What am I doing wrong?
Right.
But once it went into a klisheni, you know what a klisheni is, a second vessel. You can't put it back into a klirishin. Right? You follow? Am I
What
over your
makes
head?
it the klisheni?
You understand what's going on here?
Yeah, I
Second
didn't know you were
vessel.
allowed to do that.
Why?
Because you're taking the water out of the
Okay,
pot.
but why isn't it a second?
It is a second vessel.
Oh, okay.
No.
No,
To
that's
put, because these are both of them are klirishin.
Because you're considering it.
You're taking from one klirishin into another
Yeah.
klirishin. That's not a problem. You follow?
Yeah, I just.
It doesn't
didn't
look
know
like
you-
it.
I didn't
What?
know you were allowed to do that. I didn't know that.
Think about it. What could be the problem? What could be the problem? Hilchah
I thought
Shabbos,
something
if
about
it's
wet
fully
food.
cooked.
I
if it's
thought-
full, obviously it all has to be fully
If it's
cooked.
not fully cooked, then
It's
you're
not fully cooked, you're cooking. Of course
Yeah.
not. Cold water you're not allowed to put into the cholent pot.
I thought something about heating up wet food, like.
You're not allowed to. This is already heated. This is hot. It's coming from the klirishins. It's boiling hot water. You're not. We learned last week that you're not allowed to reheat cold water. That you're not allowed to.
Right.
it's already hot from the day.
But this is boiling hot. You're not reheating it. You're not doing anything. Want you to know, Hilchah Shabbos is very logical. It's all based on logic. The reason that we have to keep Shabbos, that's not logical. That's godly. He told us to keep Shabbos. But the rabbis, all the laws, once we have the basic biblical laws, everything that's rabbinic is logical. What about putting food back into an oven? We said you're allowed to put food back onto a stovetop. How about put into an oven? And the question is another question. Are you allowed to leave food in an oven without a blech?
In the oven.
If it's on. What do you do with an oven? You want to have hot food. So you're saying you take it out before Shabbos.
No,
And you seal it, you insulate it.
Right.
I'm not talking about insulation. I'm talking about someone wants to leave his food in the oven and have it on. So on the stove, we know what you have to do. If you want to have a pot on the fire, you have to cover the fire with a blech. What do you do in an oven? Are you allowed to leave an oven on before Shabbos and then have the food in the oven on Shabbos without a blech? The answer is no, you're not. You have to cover the oven. You have to have a blech in the oven. The question with an oven is more complicated than a stove. Because a stove, you know where the fire is, you can cover it. Where's the fire in an oven? There are different opinions about this. There's a machlekes. One opinion says that you have to insulate, in other words, you have to cover all four walls.
Oh.
Because that, it's coming from everywhere. It's on top, it's on
Behind the heating element? Or in
yeah,
front of
yeah,
it?
all where's the heating element? On top,
Top and bottom.
Yeah.
top and bottom. So you have to cover. Some say you have to cover all the sides.
But I mean,
So what's the purpose of Shabbat mode?
Well, I'm not talking about a Shabbat mode. I don't know what happens in a Shabbat. I'm not really sure how that works.
Spot mode just prevents the security feature. So there's a security feature in the oven that turns the oven off after a certain amount of time. So in case you forgot to turn it off, it'll turn on.
So it's
Spot
not
mode
on.
leaves it on and stays on.
So,
No,
but
it's,
there's no
the temperature
blech.
stays, like if you open the door, it doesn't,
Right, because
What does it do? I don't know what it does.
it stays at whatever temperature you want. Keeps it there, other ones if there was, how's it work?
It's not, if you don't have a Shabbat mode, it turns off automatically.
Yeah, for a
After a
certain
certain
amount
number
of
of
time.
hours or whatever, right, so forth.
But I think it's really for Yom Tov, not
Yeah.
really for Shabbos.
The Shabbat mode is not for Shabbos, so why do they call it Shabbat mode? So you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos?
I think you
I
can.
don't see
No,
how,
it's-
because
yeah, I think
you
you
can't
can.
put something back in the oven.
Well,
Not
the
vacuum.
answer is you
You
can't
can-
put it back. No, not if it's not.
Vacuum it if it's in before.
can't
We
put
don't
it-
it
we're
back
talking
in
about
the
if it's
oven.
there
We
before.
leave it in
Well,
till it.
take it out.
Take it out. So only if it's fully cooked could you leave it there.
Well,
If
you
it's
can-
not fully
you can-
cooked, you can't leave it in the oven.
Right, something's already cooked. You could put it on like a blech, and the next day you could put something on. It's all cooked.
Well, I'm talking about an oven now. Before you get to blech, we're going to talk about that in a second. If you're allowed to put something on Shabbos onto the blech, if it wasn't on there before Shabbos, we'll talk about that in a minute. In an oven, just like a stovetop, if it's not going to be covered, it has to be fully cooked, right? According to a more stringent opinion, not a third, not a half, it should be fully cooked. And an oven the same. If it's not going to be covered, you have to have it fully cooked. So the Shabbos mode, I think, is only if it's fully cooked, and then there's no problem with opening and closing the door. What's the problem? In an oven, there's another problem opening the door of the oven. Because the minute you open the door, the cold air went in,
Right.
and it starts controlling the controls. It starts sending off the,
Hotter
So
air,
that's
right.
where the Shabbos mode works, and nothing does anything to it. It could be open, you can close it 10 times. It's working on a different system. That's where the Shabbos mode helps.
It's on all.
It's on there, but it's not helping with regard to putting back food in the oven. I don't think you're allowed to put food back in the oven if it's not fully covered. You follow the distinction there?
Even though it's fully cooked.
Even though it's
Yeah.
fully cooked, just like on the stovetop. If it's not covered, you're not allowed to put the food back
You say
on.
covered, you mean the four
It
walls.
looks like you're cooked.
Yeah.
What?
You say covered, you mean the four walls?
Either four or bottom, whatever. There's a machlez, there's two differences of opinion. Clear? Any questions? Okay. Now, here's another thing. So you have a food on the blech. I'm giving you scenarios. And you're afraid that the food is cooking too fast. You put the fire on too high. Yeah? Your wife comes, the husband goes to shul right after candle lighting. The wife comes in and takes a look. There's smoke's coming out of the pot. Wait a minute, what's going on here? She looks under the blech. Wow, it's a big fire. I left it on too high. So now, by the time my husband comes, by the time we sit down to eat, the whole food's going to be burnt. So what's the answer? What could you do? So there's a solution to this, depending on how big your blech is. So let's say you have a stove that has 4 burners, right? These are the 4 burners, right? So in our house, we had a covering, the whole thing. But we didn't put on 4 burners because we didn't have that many pots. We had a big blech, it covered the whole thing, but we only had 1 or 2 burners on. So what happens? So this part of the blech is very, very hot. This part of the blech is not so hot. Or a little further, over here maybe it's still hot, but it's not on the fire, but it's still your hand, it can burn. It can Yatsu ledesbe, you know that means? Yatsu ledesbe means that it's hot enough that your hand gets, you immediately take it off. It's too hot for you to keep your hand there, right? So you instinctively pull it away because it's too hot for your hand. But then the real edge of the blech, where it's mamish far away from the fires, it's warm, but it's not really warm. It's like you can have your hand there, it's not really warm. So here's the scenario. Your wife sees that if she keeps it on the fires itself, you're not going to have soup by the time the husband comes home. It'll be burnt out. It'll be, it'll evaporate. Or it'll burn, if it's a stew or whatever. So what could you do? You can pick it up and move it away from the fire. You can move it away from the fire to the place. So there's 3 sections on the oven right now. It's very important for you to know. Because this is practical stuff. This happens in our house. You have the area which is on the fire, you have the area that's Yatsu Ledesbe, and then you have the area that's just lukewarm. If you're allowed to take the stove and put it over here, and then put it back a half hour later when you see, you play around it. You can move it a little away from the fire, let it cool off a little, and then move it back on. Not cool off. If it's cooled off, you're not allowed to do anything. Then you're not allowed to put it back. It's cooked already, but if it's liquid and it gets cold, it's not going to get cold. You put it away a little bit off the fire, it slows down, it doesn't get burned, and then like 10 minutes before it comes on, you slip it right back onto the fire, and then a beautiful dinner. You can move it from A to B and from B to back to A. But if you took it from A to C, you put it on the area that is literally, it's not even hot anymore, from there to put it back on the fire, you're not allowed. Got that?
So how do you know what's too cool?
You can feel it. If you put it's very simple. If Yatsu Ledesbe, then it's still okay. If it's not, if you can put your hand and it's not hot enough, then you can't put it there anymore and then put it back. That's like taking it off the stove. You follow? So you can play around over here a little bit. There's leeway. This is all, of course, having said all this, is only if it's fully cooked. Because if it's not fully cooked, then to put it back on the fire, you're cooking. So this is all of it. That's why it's so important that on before Shabbos should all be, because of these problems. Now, you come home Shabbos morning, and you're in the mood of having a kugel. The problem is that the kugel is in the fridge. And you don't like cold kugel. It's fully cooked. Are you allowed to put that kugel on the blech? And warm it up a little bit?
No.
Why? It's cooked already. Zayin bishul achar bishul. There's no cooking after cooking. Once it's cooked, but, we said before, nirikim avashel, looks like you're cooking. And you're not allowed to give the appearance of good. Taking something out of a fridge and putting it on a stove if you look like you're cooking. You're not allowed to do it. Not allowed to do it. However, there's a nature. The rabbis, there's a way to get around. Not around it, but there's something else you could do.
God bless those rabbis.
Before I talk about what you're allowed to do, let me give you scenarios of others. For example, are you allowed to take a challah that's cold and put it on the blech? Challah you're allowed to. You know why? Because how is challah usually? Challah is baked. Does anyone bake on a stove?
No.
It doesn't look like you're baking.
Right.
That doesn't give the appearance of baking. No one bakes on a stove. So what's the problem? It's baked already. As you're warming it up. There's nothing wrong with reheating something that's already baked or cooked. As long as it's dry. Right? So if it looks like you're cooking, you got a problem. If it doesn't look like you're cooking, you're allowed to. That's why you're allowed to take a piece of kugel and put it on a hot radiator. Because no one cooks on a radiator. So you're allowed to warm it up on a radiator. Because what's the problem? If it's dry, again, if it's wet and you're cooling it, or you're taking it from cold to hot, that's cooking. That you now do anyway, not on a car that's hot from the sun, or on a radiator, or of course not on the fire. But if it's already cooked and it's dry,
You
a
get a
piece
fully cooked,
has to be fully cooked.
from aromas. Put it
Yeah.
in the refrigerator.
If it's dry,
It's got the sauce.
no good,
Yeah.
no good.
All right.
Can't put it on there.
Right.
Now, what about the hot plate? There's a machlekes. If a hot plate is considered a stovetop, if it gives the appearance of cooking or not. Some say, who cooks on a hot plate? No one cooks on a hot plate. So it's not a problem. Others say it's an iffy area. So it's best not to put it on the... So what you do in that case, some say you could. Some say you could. But the best way around that is to take a sheet or like a metal pan, flip it over, and put it on the metal pan. Or on a pan, a frying pan. You flip it over and you put it on the frying, so it's not directly on the thing.
What about thin foil? I mean, sorry, thick foil.
Thick foil is not good enough. It's like putting on a blech. That's a blech. Essentially, that's a blech. However, you're allowed to put a pot. What happens if you have a pot with rice and you want to warm up the rice for the Shabbos day meal? But yet, of course, you're not allowed to put the rice on the blech. It looks like you're cooking, even though it's fully cooked and it's dry. But what you could do is you could put it on top of another pot that's on the blech. Because that doesn't look like you're cooking. That looks like you're just getting it warm. And there's nothing wrong with that. So you could put it on, too. That's if it's dry. You following? Any of this makes sense to you or not? No?
So in other words, if for example, you have a cholent pot
Yeah.
And you
You're allowed to
have
put it
rice
on
in
the
it.
cholent pot.
on the cholent,
You can put it on the cholent pot.
but you can't take the cover and turn it over so it acts as
Yeah, you could. Why not?
a, okay.
You can put it on the cover if it's flipped over, yeah?
Yeah.
You can put it on. You can't put it in the pot. You can't put it in the pot,
Put it on the top.
but you can put it on the top.
Okay. Because we've done that with challah.
Challah is no problem.
So you have to turn the pot over then.
No, the pot is full of cholent. It's full of contents. You can take the cover and fill
Yeah,
it over
yeah,
so
right.
that the handle is inside, but this is still,
Yeah.
and then you can put it on top, or you can take off the cover and put it on. But once you take off the cover and you leave it off the blech for a little while, you're not allowed to put it back on. Why? Because the water on the cover that has become, the condensation has become cold. If you're going to put it back on the pot, it's going to heat it up, and you're cooking the condensation. That's a violation. You got to keep your head. Yeah,
It is.
Hmm.
Put them on top of the cholent pot. and then-
Let's talk about insulation now. Insulation is like this. If you don't want to have your fire on Shabbos, because you're only going to use it, you have your petroleum pot in the crock pot, so that's taken care of. The only reason you need it's for the hot soup for that night. So to have the fire on a whole Shabbos, till Motzei Shabbos, you don't want to have it on. So what do people do? They boil up the soup before Shabbos, right before, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes before lichbenchen, before candle lighting. And then they insulate it with towels, pillows, blankets. They really insulate it tight, and they put it in a room wherever. And then when you come home, you're ready for the soup. They take it off, and they serve it boiling hot. It keeps it boiling hot. We do it a lot, but you have to insulate it good. However, you're not allowed to insulate it on Shabbos. You have to insulate it before Shabbos. Therefore, what happens if you insulated it and your little child went over there? What's going on? They're playing in the room, and they see over there something looks funny. They undo the blankets, and they say, oh, it's a pot. And you come, what'd you do? It's going to cool off. And you go in right away and cover it again. It's good. Not allowed to do that. Because now you're insulating it on Shabbos. Just make sure that you know these laws, that when you insulate, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. It's done before Shabbos. There's a lot of other laws regarding insulation, but that's the basics. I mean,
The reason you're not
it's 9:05, so I think we're going to cut it here. And that covers the laws of Shabbos in terms of the cooking on Shabbos. I'm going to move on next week to a totally different topic, the topic of Beirer which means selecting on Shabbos, and that's a very, very complicated
What?
selecting. Good from bad, bad from good. It's a complicated thing.